Hey everyone, how's it going today? Welcome back to another update. So as most of you guys know from yesterday's update, is that we talked a little bit about how right now at this time, the fourth stimulus package is really close to approval, at least certainly according to our politicians' words. Now, we won't talk as much about that in today's update just because we already shared it in yesterday's update, so I'll put it at the very end screen if you're just interested in knowing what's exactly been going on in that world. But within that stimulus package, one of the things that we also talked about was really about the tax policy and about certain things that are actually within that package. So right now the current story is that within that stimulus package, there are a lot of details that they're currently still working around, and it really has to do with things related to like taxes and funding. Essentially finding ways how to actually physically afford and be able to pay for the fourth stimulus package at this current time. Because otherwise, if they're not able to do that, then they're pretty much going to potentially have to try to draw money from thin air, which may actually very much be what they end up doing considering they have access to the money printing machine. However, it would be very difficult on a much more economic and financial level for basically just most of us if they end up doing that. But in today's update I really just want to kind of talk about a brand new proposal that recently just came out, and it's something that's being proposed right now, not as a standalone package, but more of as something that's going to potentially be inserted or approved with the fourth stimulus package in order to try to create funding. Otherwise, specifically, I believe this proposal is literally just called the Billionaires income tax proposal. So we're going to talk all about that in today's update. Now, maybe really quickly as an insert is that I do notice is that the majority of people here are probably really only here right now because they really want to just hear things related to stimulus checks, related to unemployment, and that for a lot of us, I think that that's really the big focus. I feel it right there. I wish they could include stimulus checks and unemployment inside. Now there is a chance, that certain things may end up potentially changing, but we've already talked a little bit about that. But the big thing right now is that it is still relatively important because a lot of how they end up changing the tax system is going to potentially impact how much funding they can potentially work with. And this money that they work with is something that can potentially lead to potential stimulus, unemployment, or just simply put is that programs that are meant to hopefully send relief, help, support, and put money in our pockets at the very end of the day. And I also just do think it's also insightful, and there are certain people specifically that might potentially be impacted, but it'll make a lot more sense by the end. So as always, maybe real fast before we begin, the same exact rule as always, consider smashing the like button because we are at least getting close. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos like this. Huge thanks if you guys have been here for a while, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, whether or not by the end, if you do or don't support this particular add-on that they're hoping to try to propose right now. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So the story to what's really going on right now is that within this stimulus package, the new proposal that we recently just found information about is literally just called the Billionaires income tax. It was recently proposed by, interestingly, Wyden, who, if you're not familiar with who he is, or maybe you kind of vaguely remember him, he's essentially the same exact person that actually interestingly put together one of the fourth unemployment proposals that had to do with kind of reforming the unemployment system. I did already make a video, so I'll put that at the very end screen if you need a little bit of a recap, because that is probably something that is related to unemployment. But within that, beyond that, is that he now officially has a brand new proposal that, as mentioned, is that it's hoping to try to increase taxes for a lot of the billionaires. This is the actual draft that they put together, so it's as official as you can possibly see, that comes directly from their official website. And the story is that they're hoping to essentially have this try to apply to the 700 billionaires that are around our country with an annual income of either over $100 million or a net worth of $1 billion or more in assets for 3 or more consecutive years. So how exactly does this essentially work is that what they're going to be doing now is that if they try to enforce this, is that they're going to be essentially collecting information based off of the assets of what all of these billionaires, so all of these major CEOs, the celebrities, the super big, Amazon, Elon Musk, those big name figures, and they're going to essentially be using their information to try to create a tax system to tax them. The specific way is that what they're going to essentially change is one of the biggest rules is that they're now going to essentially try to create a tax system that is going to apply even to something called unrealized gains. If you're not familiar with what this is essentially a very quick recap. We have talked a little bit about this, but just, for anyone that's new here, is that right now the current situation is that if you invest in the stock market, and this is a strategy that, a lot of rich people do, that I think is maybe insightful, is that whenever you invest in the stock market, a very huge strategy that a lot of rich people do is that they try to buy a lot of different assets, whether this has to do with things like stocks, gold, real estate, anything that they can essentially put money into. And what happens is that through this, they can continue to get richer and richer and richer. But the beautiful thing is that they will never have to end up being taxed on any of this if they never sell, even if it means having to pass it on to their children afterwards. So the big idea is that by doing this infinite kind of loop or just continuing postponement into trying to accumulate assets, what they can do now is that they can live a life where they pretty much never have to pay taxes. And then they also have something that they do, which is where they essentially try to borrow money and use that to be able to essentially fund all of the lifestyle and things that you kind of just see them do and enjoy their life the way that they basically live, that you probably have already seen through media. So where this really comes in now is that if this tax proposal actually ends up going through, it's going to make it where now all of these billionaires will now be taxed on the money that they made from all of these assets, even if they don't sell. Now, there is a lot of debate about what happens right now, because sometimes you might have an asset that can go up a lot in value, that can also go down a lot in value. And I believe one of the things is that because this is at the end of the day something related to taxes, it does mean is that there is a probability that if they end up actually losing money on their assets, they may actually potentially even be able to use it as a deduction. So it really kind of goes both ways as well. I believe is that if they do end up selling real estate, there is also going to be another included tax kind of situation that they have to pay off. Now, what are some special rules that might be included, important to know is that there's really a couple of them. The first off is that I do believe is that even though a lot of them will obviously be taxed at a very, very high amount of money, one thing that they are going to potentially provide is to try to create a system where they can take several years in order to try to pay off their taxes. So it's not going to be something where, they're going to necessarily be hit with like a giant absolute bill on the spot the very first day this goes through. But what is going to happen is that it's potentially going to create something where they can essentially at least have some time. I believe they're hoping to do maybe just a couple of years so that they can gradually pay off their taxes, especially because this is a new program at the end of the day. And I do believe another big thing that they're interestingly going to do is also to treat $1 billion that a person has as a non-tradable asset that they can potentially hold on to. So what this actually means is that I think the reason why they're doing this specifically is because if we started to tax a lot of the billionaires, we would be able to include or increase the funding and the money that we have to work with to do a lot of the stimulus programs, which is the reason why it's very, very related to us. But at the very, very same time, though, it can also potentially impact a lot of our billionaires' net worth. Because if they end up being taxed a lot, it is very possible that when you look at the Forbes 100 or just basically the rank of the richest people inside of our country, if some of them end up actually very heavily taxed, it's going to potentially bring down their net worth. So what this is hoping to do is essentially is that it allows a lot of the billionaires to have a percentage or a portion of what they have protected as a non-tradable asset, which means that they can kind of hold on to that to relatively protect their net worth from drastically, it is probably going to drastically change, but at least to change a little bit less than what would be if they were just completely taxed off of everything that was basically inside of their circle. But beyond this is that there are also going to be very, very particular rules that are pretty much going to be there. The goal of a lot of these rules is to essentially try to limit or avoid ways that a lot of the billionaires can now try to avoid taxes in the future. Essentially to put limits on a lot of the loopholes that are possible. This is the much more verbal side of the actual proposal, so we won't go into as many details, but I figured at least to just get the general idea of what that actually is specifically about, or what the goal is that they're trying to achieve by going through with all of this. So really beyond this that's what I really just wanted to share in today's update. So if you guys hopefully found that relatively insightful, maybe consider smashing the like button if you guys haven't done so. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell if you guys haven't done so. Huge thanks if you guys have made it this far, especially if you guys, were able to make it through this. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts about honestly anything, maybe whether or not you support this. If you are watching this on release date, have a great, happy Halloween weekend. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much again.